She bought an old farmhouse for 15 cents at a public auction where wealthy book collectors and historians stood in complete silence, refusing to bid on what appeared to be a treasure hunter's dream. But as Elena Castellanos soon discovered, some doors are sealed shut for reasons far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Elena Castellanos stood in the September sunshine outside the county courthouse in Ravenswood, New Hampshire, her hands still raised from placing what should have been the most contested bid of her career. The 1870s farmhouse sat on 9 acres of pristine woodland with a restored barn, natural spring, and original post and beam construction. Even in disrepair, properties like this routinely sold for $100,000 or more in this part of New England. The auctioneer, a portly man named Gerald Hutchins who'd been running estate sales in the region for 30 years, held his gavel suspended in mid-air. His usual rapid-fire enthusiasm had evaporated, replaced by something that looked disturbingly like reluctance. "Going once," he called out, his voice lacking any of its typical theatrical flair. Elena scanned the crowd of roughly 40 people gathered on the courthouse steps. She recognized at least 15 faces, antiquarian book dealers from Boston, Providence, and Portland who traveled the same estate sale circuit she did. 3 were tenured professors from Dartmouth and Yale who specialized in rare manuscripts. 2 worked for Christie's auction house. 1 was a private collector she'd competed against for a first edition Poe just last month in Connecticut. These were serious players. People who made 6-figure deals over breakfast. People who'd driven hours to attend this auction specifically. Yet not one of them had raised their hand to bid. They weren't even looking at the projection screen showing photos of the property. They were looking at her, and the expressions on their faces made Elena's triumph feel suddenly hollow. Not envy. Not the usual competitive frustration of losing a valuable acquisition. Something that looked disturbingly like pity, as if they were watching someone unknowingly step off a cliff edge. Going twice. A woman detached herself from the crowd and approached Elena. Beatrice Whitmore was in her late 70s, a retired archivist from the New Hampshire Historical Society who Elena had worked with on several estate appraisals. The elderly woman's weathered hands clutched a faded leather journal, and her blue eyes held an intensity that Elena had never seen before. "Miss Castellanos," Beatrice whispered urgently, her voice barely audible over the murmur of the crowd. "Please withdraw your bid. I'm begging you. That farmhouse, what's inside it? You don't understand what you're buying." Before Elena could ask what she meant, the gavel came down with a crack that seemed to echo off the granite courthouse walls with unnatural loudness. "Sold to the young lady in the burgundy jacket for 15 cents. The crowd began to disperse immediately, not the usual lingering and networking that characterized these events, but a rapid exodus as if people couldn't leave fast enough. But as Elena made her way through the thinning crowd toward the clerk's office to complete her purchase, she caught fragments of whispered conversations that made her steps slow. "Should we have been more direct with the warning? Nobody's been past that door since 1923. The Winterbourne family. God rest their souls. She has no idea what she's just inherited." Elena felt goosebumps rise on her arms despite the warm afternoon. She'd been to hundreds of estate auctions in her 8 years as a rare book dealer, but she'd never experienced anything like this. The fear in these people's voices was genuine. At the clerk's window, a young woman named Sarah Chen processed Elena's paperwork with trembling hands that made the official stamps rattle against the desk. When Elena tried to make small talk, asking about the property's history, Sarah's face went pale. I can't discuss it, Miss Castellanos. County regulations prohibit employees from commenting on properties with contested histories." "Contested histories? What does that mean?" Sarah glanced nervously toward the doorway where her supervisor stood watching. "All I can tell you is that you should read the property disclosure form very carefully. Especially page 7. And whatever you do." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper, "Don't open the library on the 2nd floor. Please." Before Elena could press for more information, Sarah quickly stamped the final document and practically fled to a back office, leaving Elena standing at the counter with a deed to a property that everyone seemed terrified of. As Elena walked out of the courthouse clutching her paperwork, she became aware of an eerie phenomenon. Every single person who'd attended the auction, all 47 of them, she'd counted, had stopped whatever they were doing. They stood in various positions around the courthouse square, by cars, on benches, near the fountain. All of them perfectly still. All of them watching her. Not moving. Not talking among themselves. Just watching with those same expressions of sympathetic dread. Waiting to see what she would do next. As if they expected something to happen. Something that had happened before. Elena forced herself to walk calmly to her car, fighting the urge to run. She could feel their eyes on her back with every step. When she finally closed her car door and locked it, her hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. What had she just bought? The drive to Winterbourne Farm. The GPS directed Elena along increasingly narrow country roads that wound through dense forests of maple, birch, and pine. The fall colors were just beginning to show, touches of gold and crimson among the green that would explode into full autumn glory within weeks. Under normal circumstances, Elena would have found the drive peaceful, even meditative. Today, each turn deeper into the woods felt like descending into something she didn't understand. Elena had built her business on finding overlooked book collections in old estates. She had a master's degree in library science from Simmons University and had apprenticed with one of Boston's most respected antiquarian dealers. She knew how to spot value that others missed, how to authenticate rare editions, how to navigate the complex world of estate sales and private collectors. But she'd never encountered anything like the Winterbourne property. The listing had appeared on the estate auction site just 3 days ago with minimal information: historic farmhouse, approximate 3,200 square feet, original fixtures, 9 acres, significant book collection, sold as is. The photos showed a rambling 2-story structure with multiple additions, wraparound porch, and what appeared to be intact period details throughout. The phrase significant book collection had caught her attention immediately. The minimum bid of 15 cents had seemed like a typo, but when she'd called to verify, the auction house had confirmed it was correct. Unusual circumstances, the woman on the phone had said cryptically. The estate wishes to transfer ownership quickly. If you're interested, I'd recommend attending in person. Now Elena understood why no minimum had been set. They'd been hoping someone, anyone, would take the property off their hands. The farmhouse appeared at the end of a long gravel drive, and Elena's first thought was that it was even more beautiful than the photos had suggested. A classic New Hampshire farmhouse dating to the 1870s, with the original structure clearly visible despite several additions that had been built over the decades. The clapboard siding had weathered to a soft silver gray, and the multi-pane windows still held their original wavy glass. But there was something unsettling about the property that Elena couldn't immediately identify. Everything was too well maintained for an abandoned building. The porch boards were solid, not rotted. The roof looked recently repaired. The windows were intact. Someone had been caring for this property, keeping it from falling into ruin, even though, according to the whispers at the auction, no one had lived here in a century. Elena parked in the circular drive and sat for a moment, studying the house. The front door was painted a faded red, and above it hung a carved wooden sign, Winterbourne Farm EST 1874. She checked her phone. Full signal. That was good. She'd been half expecting to lose reception out here in the woods, though she wasn't sure why that thought had occurred to her. Taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, Elena grabbed her bag of tools, flashlights, measuring tape, camera, notebook, and approached the front door. The key the clerk had given her turned smoothly in the lock, as if the mechanism had been recently oiled. The door swung open without a sound. Inside Winterbourne Farm. The interior took Elena's breath away for reasons that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with professional astonishment. The main floor was a preservation dream: original wide plank pine floors, hand-hewn ceiling beams, a massive fieldstone fireplace that dominated the living room, and built-in bookshelves flanking every wall. But it was clear that someone had walked away from this house in the middle of their daily life. Furniture sat arranged for comfort and use. Books lined the shelves in careful order. A reading table near the window held a lamp and what appeared to be very old reading glasses, as if someone had just stepped away for a moment and would return at any time. The sense of interrupted life was overwhelming. Elena moved through the room slowly, her trained eye cataloging details. The kitchen still contained dishes in the cupboards, though covered with a century of dust. The parlor held a piano with sheet music on the stand, Brahms, she noted. The dining room table was set for 6, plates and silverware arranged precisely, waiting for a meal that had never been served. What had happened here in 1923 that had caused the occupants to simply leave everything behind? She found partial answers in the study on the first floor. Unlike the rest of the house, this room had clearly been disturbed more recently. File cabinets stood open, their contents carefully preserved in acid-free folders. A modern filing system had been imposed on historical documents. Elena began reading through the papers, her historian's curiosity overriding her growing unease. The first document was a letter dated September 15, 1923, written in elegant cursive on letterhead from Dr. Vivian Winterbourne, Professor of Classical Studies, Dartmouth College. My dearest sister Charlotte, I write to you with news both thrilling and deeply troubling. The collection Father spent 30 years assembling is far more significant than any of us realized. Among the volumes he acquired on his travels through Europe and the Near East are texts that scholars believed lost to history. The Delacroix manuscript. The Prague Codex. The Marbury Testament. These are not merely rare books, Charlotte. They are windows into knowledge that our modern world has forgotten or deliberately chosen to abandon. The letter continued. I have spent the past 6 months studying Father's collection, and I must confess that what I've learned has shaken my understanding of what is possible. These texts describe procedures, techniques, and natural laws that contradict our current scientific understanding. At first, I dismissed them as medieval superstition. But I decided to test one of the simpler procedures described in the Delacroix manuscript, nothing dangerous, merely a botanical experiment involving accelerated growth using specific harmonic frequencies and herbal preparations. Charlotte, it worked. A seedling that should have taken months to mature reached full growth in 17 days. I've repeated the experiment 6 times with identical results. If this one procedure is genuine, then how many others might be equally valid? What else might these books teach us that modern science insists is impossible? Elena's hands trembled slightly as she set down the letter. She was a rationalist, a scholar who dealt in verifiable facts. But the detailed description in Dr. Winterbourne's letter didn't read like superstition. It read like a scientific report from someone struggling to reconcile observation with existing belief. She found another letter, this one dated November 3, 1923, written by the same hand but noticeably more agitated. Charlotte, you must come immediately. Something has gone terribly wrong. I followed the procedures in the Marbury Testament exactly as written, a simple demonstration of what the text calls sympathetic resonance, but the results were far more powerful than the manuscript suggested. I've experienced visions, Charlotte. Not dreams or hallucinations, but genuine visions of places and times I've never visited. And the knowledge that comes with them, it's like drinking from a fire hose. Too much, too fast, too overwhelming. Worse, I'm not the only one affected. My research assistants, all 3 of them, have reported similar experiences after spending time in the library. Dr. Marcus Thorne has stopped sleeping entirely, claiming that the dreams are too intense. Miss Rebecca Hayes won't go near the 2nd floor anymore, saying she hears whispers when she approaches the library door. And poor Jonathan Wade has become obsessed with a text he claims speaks to him. I'm beginning to understand why Father kept this collection private, why he warned us never to study it too intensely. Some knowledge isn't meant to be acquired all at once. The human mind needs time to process, to integrate, to make sense of information that contradicts everything we think we know. These books don't just contain information, they seem to actively transfer understanding in ways that bypass normal learning. It's like they're designed to overwhelm and transform the reader. I'm sealing the library tomorrow. No one else should have access to these texts until we better understand what they do to people who read them. This isn't superstition, Charlotte. This is genuine danger disguised as scholarship. The final letter in the folder was dated November 8, 1923, and it was not written by Dr. Winterbourne. The handwriting was different, more formal, clearly from a legal professional. To whom it may concern, this document serves as official notification that Dr. Vivian Winterbourne, aged 42, was found deceased in her study on November 7, 1923. The county medical examiner has ruled the death as resulting from acute cardiac failure, though the circumstances remain unusual. Dr. Winterbourne was discovered at her desk, apparently having died while writing. Her final written words were, "The books remember. They remember everything their previous readers learned, and they pass it on. That's the danger. It's cumulative." In accordance with Dr. Winterbourne's final instructions, dated November 3, 1923, the second-floor library has been sealed. 3 sets of military-grade padlocks have been installed, and the keys have been deposited with the law firm of Morrison, Chen and Associates in Concord, New Hampshire, to be held in perpetuity. Dr. Winterbourne's estate has established a trust fund to maintain the property indefinitely while ensuring that no one gains access to the sealed library. Additional note, Dr. Winterbourne's 3 research assistants, Marcus Thorne, Rebecca Hayes, and Jonathan Wade, were all found deceased within 10 days of Dr. Winterbourne's death. Authorities have classified these deaths as 1 suicide, 1 accidental drowning, and 1 death by unexplained causes. No foul play is suspected, though the timing is considered highly unusual. Elena sat back in the desk chair, her mind reeling. 4 people dead within 2 weeks, all connected to whatever was in that library. And not just any 4 people, a respected professor and 3 trained researchers. Educated, rational people who'd presumably approached the collection with scholarly caution. What could possibly be in those books that was dangerous enough to kill 4 people? She continued searching through the files and found maintenance records dating from 1923 to the present year. Someone, presumably the trust established by Dr. Winterbourne, had been paying for quarterly inspections, structural repairs, and preservation services for the past 100 years. The most recent inspection report was dated just 3 months ago. Property remains structurally sound. Second-floor library door remains secured with all 3 padlocks intact. No evidence of attempted entry. Recommend continued quarterly monitoring. Someone had been carefully maintaining this property for a century, spending what must have been hundreds of thousands of dollars over the decades, all to keep one room sealed. Elena checked her watch. It was approaching 4 p.m. She'd been in the house for over 2 hours, lost in the documents. The afternoon light was beginning to fade, casting long shadows through the old-fashioned windows. She needed to see that library door. The sealed library. The staircase to the second floor was at the back of the house, accessible through a hallway lined with more bookshelves. These shelves contained what appeared to be Dr. Winterbourne's personal reading collection, academic journals, classical texts in their original Greek and Latin, botanical references, anthropology studies. The collection of a serious scholar. But as Elena climbed the stairs, she noticed something odd. Her phone signal had dropped from full bars to nothing. She checked the screen, no service at all. That was strange. Cell coverage in rural New Hampshire could be spotty, but she'd had perfect reception downstairs just minutes ago. The second-floor hallway was darker than the first floor, the windows here smaller and set higher in the walls. There were 4 doors, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and at the end of the hall, a door that was clearly different from all the others. While the other doors were simple pine painted white, this door was constructed of solid oak, reinforced with black iron bands that looked like they belonged on a medieval castle. 3 massive padlocks secured the door, each one different, as if Dr. Winterbourne had wanted to ensure that no single key could open them all. Above the door, carved deep into the wooden lintel, was an inscription in Latin. Elena's classical education allowed her to translate. Scientia potestas est, sed nimia scientia est mors. Knowledge is power, but too much knowledge is death. Below that, in smaller letters, another warning in English. What lies beyond changes those who enter. Consider carefully if you wish to be changed. Elena stood before the door, her heart pounding. She could feel the weight of the warnings, the documented deaths, the century of careful sealing. Every rational part of her brain screamed that she should leave this door closed, that she should walk away from whatever lay beyond it. But she was a scholar. A seeker of knowledge. And she now legally owned whatever was in that room. Her hand reached toward the locks, not to open them, she didn't have keys yet, but just to touch them, to confirm they were real and solid. The moment her fingers made contact with the first padlock, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, making her jump. She pulled it out and saw that she'd somehow received a text message despite having no signal. The message was from an unknown number. Miss Castellanos. Step away from the library door immediately. You are being watched. Do not attempt to open it. Your life depends on this. Look out the window to your right. Elena's blood ran cold. She slowly turned her head toward the window at the end of the hallway, the one that overlooked the front of the property. A figure stood at the edge of the tree line, perfectly still, watching the house. Even from this distance, Elena could make out details, a tall person in a dark coat, holding what appeared to be binoculars trained directly on the second-floor window where she stood. When the figure saw her looking, they slowly lowered the binoculars. Then, deliberately, they held up a sign that had clearly been prepared in advance. The message was written in large, clear letters. Do not open the library. Others are coming. The figure held the sign for exactly 5 seconds, ensuring Elena had time to read it, then turned and disappeared into the forest with practiced efficiency. Elena stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Someone had been watching the house. They'd known exactly when she would arrive. They'd been prepared with a warning sign. And they'd managed to send her a text message through a phone that showed no signal. Who were they? How had they known she'd be here? And what did they mean by others are coming? Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. You have approximately 6 hours before multiple interested parties arrive at the property. By tomorrow morning, your quiet purchase will be known throughout the rare book community and beyond. People will come who are far less polite than I am. If you value your safety, leave now and never return. The library has been sealed for good reason. Some doors should remain closed. Elena's hands trembled as she read the message. 6 hours. By midnight, according to this mysterious watcher, her peaceful acquisition would turn into something far more dangerous. She looked back at the sealed library door with its ominous warnings carved into the wood. Then she looked at her phone, at the messages from someone who clearly knew far more about this property than she did. Every survival instinct she possessed told her to leave immediately, to abandon this 15-cent purchase and forget she'd ever heard of Winterbourne Farm. But something else whispered in the back of her mind. A scholar's curiosity. A rare book dealer's instinct that something tremendously valuable lay behind that door. And perhaps a touch of stubbornness. Elena had never been good at being told what she couldn't do. She had 6 hours to decide, walk away from the mystery, or stay and discover what a century of warnings had been trying to hide. As she stood in that darkening hallway, trying to make the most important decision of her life, she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. From behind the sealed library door came a soft sound. Almost like a sigh. Or perhaps the whisper of pages turning, as if the books beyond that barrier were somehow aware that someone new had arrived. Someone who might finally open the door that had been closed for 100 years. Elena called the authorities that night, turning over everything she'd discovered. Federal investigators arrived at dawn, documenting the sealed library and Dr. Winterbourne's warnings. The collection was transferred to a secure research facility where scholars could study it safely, under strict protocols. The farmhouse became a historical landmark. Elena used her reward money to establish the Winterbourne Institute for Responsible Knowledge, dedicated to studying forgotten texts without repeating past tragedies. Sometimes she wondered what was behind that door. But she'd learned the most important lesson: Some knowledge is worth pursuing, but only if you respect its power to change you. Her 15-cent investment taught her wisdom, not just courage.